So I'm sitting here reading what is probably the most significant secondary source on the philosopher Alfred Whitehead ever published. It's by Isabel Stengers, a French philosopher. It's called Thinking with Whitehead, a free and wild creation of concepts, is the subtitle. And Whitehead learned a lot from the psychology of William James, and wanted to sort of generalize the insights into the nature of experience that James uncovered. And he wanted to produce a metaphysics out of William James's phenomenology and psychology. Not that James didn't, do ontology. He certainly did, but Whitehead wanted to be more systematic about it, being as he was a mathematician. And there's another school of thought which is not really in the same lineage as Whiteheadian cosmology and metaphysics, but I think is compatible with it, and that is the enactive paradigm and the autopoietic biology of the late Francisco Varela, which is being carried forward nowadays by, at least most prominently, the philosopher Thompson. And I think there are important, similarities and congruencies between enactivism and Whitehead's approach to doing philosophy and thinking reality. To sort of let those similarities become more explicit, I wanted to read an excerpt from one of William James's books called Some Problems in Philosophy that Stengers has printed in her book on Whitehead. It's about philosophical faith, the faith of the thinker in the face of any attempt to know the real. So William James writes, "We can and we may, as it were, jump with both feet off the ground into or towards a world of which we trust the other parts to meet up with our jump. And only so can the making of a perfected world, of the pluralistic pattern, ever take place. Only through our precursive trust in this world can it come into being." Precursive is sort of a play on the idea of discursive knowledge, which comes after the fact. Precursive trust comes before we're able to articulate the reason why we might do something, be it a thought or a physical movement. James continues, "There is no inconsistency anywhere in this, and no vicious circle. Unless a circle of poles holding themselves upright by leaning on one another, or a circle of dancers revolving by holding each other's hands, be vicious. The faith circle is so congruous with human nature that the only explanation of the veto that intellectualists pass upon it must be sought in the offensive character to them of the faiths of certain concrete persons." In other words, the intellectualists or the skeptics who say that we should do away with faith and belief and only accept certain empirical scientific knowledge, that we don't need faith to have even that kind of knowledge. These skeptics usually form a distaste for faith because of the particular faiths of certain individuals, be they religious fanatics or what have you. And James is saying, just because certain faiths are distasteful to us doesn't mean that all faith is detestable, because from James's perspective, faith is a necessary constitutive factor of any knowledge, of any attempt to think reality. So James continues, "Such possibilities of offense have, however, to be put up with on empiricist principles. The long run of experience may weed out the more foolish faiths. Those who held them will then have failed. But without the wiser faiths of the others, the world could never be perfected. So this is similar to enactivism, I think, in the epistemological framework that is enactivism, and that from the enactive perspective, the world isn't pre-made and existing externally, only after the fact coming to be represented by the mind internally. Rather, the world and the mind are brought forth in experience in a sort of co-constitutive way. This description of the act of knowing in enactivism is coupled with a description of the process of life, of biological autopoiesis, or self-production. So it's a theory of knowledge. Enactivism is a theory of knowledge that is grounded in an account of our embodiment, of our biology, and the structure and principles at work in our biology. There's a sort of symmetry or isomorphism between that process which creates our organism and that process which creates our thinking. That thinking is a playing out of the same rules, the same habits that make us alive. And that just as organisms construct their environments and aren't merely passively selected by that environment, as some construals of Darwin would seem to suggest, an autopoietic biology would be one in which the organism constructs its environment, and an enactive epistemology would be one in which the knower and the known co-construct one another. And so it's never just the organism creating its environment. There's a two-way street there, but it's not the object creating or the environment creating the organism or the subject, but continual co-creation between organism and environment, between subject and object. And there's a sort of trust that's required, or faith in this process, which is really the process of life, of being alive. And I think James's excerpt there really describes that trust well, and calls out those skeptics who would say that we can think about the real in the absence of any such trust or faith. I'm going to post a link to a blog post that goes into these issues more along the lines of dealing with Stenger's understanding of Whitehead rather than James and enactivism, though those get mixed in there too. So yeah, thanks for listening. Let me know what you think about this philosophical faith.